It's a real shame how the topic of immunity is hardly ever mentioned in introductory zoology classes. How an organism protects itself from all of those bad microbes, and this can include bacteria, viruses, and eukaryotic parasites, as well as toxins and even cancers, is a pretty crucial piece to the puzzle of how it survives long enough to reproduce successfully. Immune defense is a pretty marvelous thing if you think about it. And it's also something that really comes to its highest level of sophistication in vertebrates, our group, as well as the focal topic for this unit. In this video, I'm going to get things started with a discussion of innate immunity, the more general of the two immunities that are present in most multicellular organisms. Innate immunity, as you may have guessed from its name, is there from the very start of life. The next video will address the more complicated and very exciting adaptive immunity, which is found only in vertebrates and allows the organism to generate very specific counterattacks tailored to the particular disease-causing agent that's attacking the vertebrate host. Innate immunity is basically comprised of a very generic sort of response that defends the multicellular host against infection by microbes. Before getting along any further, though, I want you to think about the bigger question at hand. Some people might ask, why are there such microbes and why do they want to kill you? Well, let's start by recognizing the fallacy of the statement. It's not that they want to kill you or anything else. To say this is just projecting the human feeling of desire, expressed by the verb want, onto something that's incapable of human feelings. So let's reword that thought. Why are there so many different things that would do harm to you? Start by considering the big picture ecology of microbes. Think of all the bacteria that degrade the dead and decaying organic matter in the soil. Maybe you or someone you know keeps a compost pile for breaking down yard waste and making soil amendment. I keep a couple of compost bins in my backyard, and during the warmer months, I can fill them up with yard waste every week, and the bins sort of spontaneously half-empty themselves by the following week. For every 100 liters of stuff I put in, I'll probably only get 5 to 10 liters of finished compost. What happens to all that biomass? Well, the yard waste is just feeding the decomposers, bacteria, fungi, worms, and a few other kinds of life, which then dies and gets eaten by other microbes. Live things eating the dead things I put into my bins, and then they die and get eaten by other live things. This is the same process that happens in the soil or at the bottom of the ocean or a lake. Bacteria in particular have the capacity for tearing through lots of dead biomass in a short amount of time. Now, from the standpoint of the bacteria, what's the difference between a big pile of yard waste and a living plant in my garden? What's keeping the bacteria from decomposing them, or for that matter, all of us living things? And by this, I mean while we're still alive. Well, nothing really, except that you and I and all living things have certain protections against these microbes, and these defenses are maintained up until the day that we die and become ourselves yard waste. Not all microbes are willing to wait around for an organism to die on its own. A bacterium is considered a pathogen if it has the ability to cause an infection or disease. This basically means that these microorganisms, which used to be regular decomposers, have evolved abilities that allow them to attack organisms while they're still alive. Faced with this kind of challenge, multicellular life, including all animals and plants, had to evolve mechanisms for defending against this onslaught of attacks by impatient microbes. Without some kind of defense, we wouldn't last any longer than the stuff decomposing in my compost bin. Anatomical barriers are always the first line of defense. In order to keep the bad microbes out, you put up an impenetrable barrier between you and the microbes. In a mammal like you, the skin and mucous membranes serve this role. And I should note that your anatomical defenses are greatly assisted by a huge population of resident microbes, your microflora. that live on your skin and mucous membrane surfaces and create inhospitable conditions for any bad bacteria that might otherwise set up house on your exterior surfaces. Yes, it's absolutely true that you are covered by a shell of helpful, living bacterial cells that altogether outnumber the cells of your own body by a factor of 10. But this isn't enough. It's eventually going to happen that this outer layer of defense will be breached. Maybe there's an open wound in the skin. This will have brought in an assortment of bacteria into the normally bacteria-free interior of the body below the first line of defense. And these invaders would include the normal microflora as well as any other bacteria or spores that had been on the skin or whatever caused the wound in the first place. Now, if you got such a wound, you might use peroxide or some kind of topical antimicrobial treatment in order to blast away any of the opportunistic microbes that might cause an infection. Some kinds of microbes are particularly nasty because they have an ability to penetrate the skin without a puncture wound, abrasion, laceration, or other open lesion. One name that comes to mind here is Staphylococcus aureus. This is a particularly risky thing to have get on your skin because it produces an enzyme called hyaluronidase that allows these bacteria to get through the barrier that's normally impenetrable. If a bad microbe is lucky enough to make it past your first line of defense, what happens then? What's going to be there to stop it from turning you into a slimy sack of liquid compost? The second line of defense is innate immunity mediated at a cellular level. The animal's cells basically have a way of telling when the first line is breached and then respond by launching a counterattack. This is possible because the animal is capable of recognizing molecules that are characteristic of microbes and never present in a healthy animal. This mechanism involves special proteins on cell surfaces called pattern recognition receptors. Cells bearing these receptors are distributed throughout the interior of the animal, i.e., in parts where there should be no microbes at all. When these receptors are triggered, the cell will launch some kind of response. Usually, this involves bringing in the help of other cells that will hopefully gum up and destroy the invading microbes before they have a chance to take over the host. In humans and other vertebrates, we have what's called a complement system, which is a hugely elaborate pattern recognition response of innate immunity. Our version of the system is highly sophisticated and comprised of many different proteins that circulate in our blood in an inactive form, but are triggered into activity through a complex cascade reaction. What basically happens is that the invading microbe is recognized, and this makes the proteins transform themselves into microbe-killing proteases and membrane attack complexes. It's kind of like Agent Smith going after Neo in The Matrix. Never mind if you haven't seen the movies. My point is that we do have this fabulously complex system, and if you ever take a higher level physiology class, you'll probably find yourself going nuts trying to learn all of the different molecules involved in the complement cascade and how they interact with each other. But in the end, the complement system is really just a highly elaborate extension of the second line of innate immunity that is present in all animals, all plants, all fungi, and many other kinds of eukaryotic organisms, even unicellular ones. As far as innate immunity goes, it's basically the same duo of mechanisms, anatomical barriers and pattern recognition receptors that occur in a continuum of levels of complexity across the animal kingdom. On the other hand, acquired or adaptive immunity, the topics of the next video, is purely an innovation existing within the vertebrate domain.